The palace of the Arkel Dominion stood like a mountain of living crystal, rising from the misty plains of the homeworld. Its tall spires shimmered in soft colors, shifting as the twin suns crossed the sky. Every surface glowed, every hall echoed with faint music, and every corner carried the weight of ancient tradition. For most who walked its shining floors, it was a place of honor and history. For Darius Hale, a human guard stationed at the Queen's eastern wing, it was also a place where he felt almost invisible. Darius had served the Dominion for 3 years, since humanity signed its alliance with the Arkel. When he first arrived, everything amazed him. The gravity that felt a little too light, the air that tasted faintly metallic, and the aliens who moved with calm grace. But after a while, he learned something important. Humans were rare here. And because of that, almost everyone ignored him. Arkel nobles were tall, elegant beings with smooth silver skin and eyes that glowed faintly in different colors. They wore layered robes made from shifting fabric that looked like it had a life of its own. When they passed Darius, they often did not look at him at all. Some nodded politely, but most treated him like decoration, something placed in the palace for formality, not importance. Still, Darius never complained. He had chosen this job because he believed humans and Arkel could build something better together, and even if he was often overlooked, he was proud to stand guard in the heart of an alien empire. He studied their customs, followed their rules, and showed the best of what humans could offer. That was how he lived his days, quiet, watchful, and careful. But lately, something had changed. The palace felt different. The halls were filled with hushed voices. Servants walked faster. Nobles shared glances full of worry or harsh judgment. Even the air felt tense, like a storm waiting to break. Most people could sense it, but very few understood why. And Darius, being the unnoticed guard in the corner, was the perfect person to catch details others missed. It began one morning during his shift outside the Queen's private council chamber. Darius stood still beside the door, hands behind his back, face calm. A pair of nobles approached, their robes deep blue, their voices low but sharp. As they passed, he caught a few words. The life web is unstable. If the breach spreads, the Queen must not hear too soon. The two nobles went around the corner, leaving Darius with more questions than answers. The life web was an ancient Arkel structure. He had heard of it only once during training. It was a vast energy network connecting many of the Dominion's systems, including their healing chambers and communication lines. A breach in it could mean something serious, a technology failure, a political threat, or even an internal conflict. But why hide it from the Queen? Darius said nothing, but he listened more carefully from that day forward. Every day brought new details. A squad of engineers arrived unexpectedly and worked through the night. A few advisors from distant colonies hurried into meetings with pale, worried faces. A security rotation changed without warning, replacing experienced guards with new ones Darius had never seen. Even the Queen, Seraphel IX, seemed distracted. Queen Seraphel was known throughout the Dominion for her calm leadership. Her presence carried a soft glow, her voice smooth and steady. She had spent years pushing for peaceful cooperation with humans, even against resistance from older nobles. But lately, she looked tired. She walked faster, spoke less, and seemed lost in thought. She would pass Darius without noticing him, which he expected, but the look in her eyes told him her mind was somewhere far away. One afternoon, as Darius stood near the balcony hallway, he heard nervous whispers from two young attendants. They spoke quickly, unaware that the human guard understood enough Arkel language to follow their conversation. Her Majesty is stressed. She asked for another reading of the life web. They say someone tampered with it. No one would dare. You don't know that. Darius felt a chill crawl up his spine. Someone had tampered with it? Why? And how? He kept the information to himself, repeating it in his mind until the pieces formed a pattern. Something was happening inside the palace, something hidden, something dangerous. But he had no proof, no authority, and no one who would take him seriously, even if he asked questions. He was a simple human guard, in a palace full of powerful beings. His job was to stay silent and follow orders. But humans had a habit of noticing things others missed, and Darius had a habit of understanding patterns. Late one evening, the palace grew quiet. The suns had set, and the halls glowed softly with bioluminescent lights. Darius finished his shift and walked toward the guard barracks. But before he reached the corridor, he noticed something strange: two nobles emerging from a restricted wing. The area was usually guarded, but tonight, it was empty. The nobles looked nervous, whispering urgently as they left. Darius paused. He did not approach them. That would break protocol. But as soon as they disappeared, he walked casually near the entrance and looked inside. The hallway was dim. A faint pulse of violet light flickered at the far end. That was unusual. Arkel lighting was always smooth and stable. He stood there for a moment, unsure. He had no reason to enter. No orders. No permission. But something deep inside him said this was connected to everything happening lately. He turned away, forcing himself to walk back to the barracks. He needed to think. That night, he couldn't sleep. The room he shared with other human guards felt heavy with silence. He stared at the ceiling, replaying everything he had witnessed over the past few days. The whispers about a breach, the tense meetings, the restricted wing with flickering lights, the Queen's tired expression, the sudden schedule changes, pieces of a puzzle without edges. Finally, he sat up and rubbed his face. "There's something going on," he whispered to himself. "Something big, and they're hiding it." But the most unsettling thought came next. Who is they? Not the Queen, that part was clear. Something was being kept from her. But why would nobles and security officers hide information from their own monarch? The Dominion had strict laws about loyalty. Betrayal was rare and severely punished. Yet Darius couldn't shake the feeling that a secret group was moving within the palace, and he had stumbled onto the edges of their plan. The next day, Darius returned to his post. The palace buzzed with even more tension than before. The Queen's consort, Lord Valor, walked past him with an unreadable expression. Valor was respected and charming, with soft silver eyes that shone like moonlight. Darius had always thought Valor was too controlled, too perfect. The kind of person who always smiled, but never revealed anything real beneath it. As Valor passed, he spoke quietly to his advisor. "The preparations must be completed soon. Non-10 Valor passed here. Non-10 Valor passed here. Non-10 Valor passed here." His advisor nodded. "Everything is aligned, my lord." Darius's instincts sharpened. Something about that exchange felt wrong, too vague, too guarded. He turned his head slightly, pretending to adjust his helmet, and watched them walk away. Valor's steps were quick, almost impatient. The advisor kept glancing behind him. Whatever preparations they spoke of, Darius doubted they were harmless. Throughout the day, Darius saw Valor twice more, once entering the restricted wing from the night before, and once leaving a secured council room with several nobles who wore expressions of forced calm. Every time, Valor seemed alert, as if watching for someone, or making sure no one was watching him. That evening, as Darius stood on patrol, he heard something strange in the distance. A soft hum, like energy flowing through a damaged conduit. The sound echoed faintly, rising, falling, then fading. It came from the direction of the lifeweb chamber. For the first time, he felt a deep, unsettling certainty. The threat was real, and it was growing. He didn't know what the nobles were hiding, or why Valor seemed involved, or what danger the Queen faced. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. No one else was paying attention. No one else noticed the quiet details. No one else saw the pattern forming. Except him. Darius straightened, tightening his grip on his staff. He didn't have power or authority, but he had something the palace had forgotten humans possessed: persistence, instinct, and the refusal to ignore danger. He would keep watching. He would keep listening. And if the Queen was truly in danger, he would be ready, even if she barely knew he existed. The next morning began quietly. But Darius Hale felt anything except calm. The palace lights glowed softly along the corridors, and the air carried its usual metallic scent. Yet something invisible pushed against his nerves. He woke early, dressed in his guard uniform, and walked toward his assigned post with steady steps. On the outside, he looked calm. On the inside, his thoughts were a storm. His mind returned again and again to what he had seen the previous day. Lord Valor's secretive movements, the strange nobles sneaking out of a restricted wing, and the quiet whisper about preparations. Every piece felt important, like threads tied to something larger, but none of it made sense yet. He hoped today might give him more clarity, or at least more clues. When he reached the Eastern Hall, another guard, a tall alien named Talaris, nodded at him. "Good timing, human," Talaris said in a neutral voice. "The Queen has early meetings today." Darius nodded politely. He liked Talaris. Unlike most nobles, Talaris treated him with basic respect. Still, Darius could see tension even in Talaris's normally calm posture. Darius took his place near the entrance of the Queen's audience chamber. Nobles moved in and out, their robes shifting colors with every step. Some wore anxious expressions, others whispered rapidly, and a few avoided eye contact entirely. Something was stirring beneath all the polished calm. The Queen's meeting began behind closed doors. Darius kept his position, listening without appearing to listen. The thick crystal walls muffled most conversations, but the raised voice of Lord Valor reached him more than once. His tone wasn't angry, just sharp, insistent, as if he pushed for something the Queen disagreed with. Darius couldn't understand the words clearly, but he heard enough to feel uneasy. "Delay is unwise. The lower sectors must remain closed. Your plan will reduce stability." The Queen's voice responded, soft but firm. "Not without full evaluation. Humans will not be removed. Transparency is necessary." Darius straightened slightly. "Removed? Who wanted humans removed? And why would someone propose such a thing?" Before he could think deeper, the audience chamber doors opened. Nobles stepped out, masks of polite expressions hiding whatever arguments had taken place. The Queen emerged last, her luminous eyes dimmer than usual. Valor followed her closely, his face smooth and unreadable. As they passed, the Queen did not glance at Darius, but Valor's eyes drifted toward him for the briefest moment. It was not a simple look. It felt like Valor was checking whether he had been listening. Darius lowered his gaze respectfully, hiding his surprise. "Why watch him? Why now?" Valor spoke softly to the Queen. "You must trust my counsel. There are matters you cannot see clearly from your position." The Queen's answer was calm. "And yet you ask me to make decisions without full truth." Valor paused, and his expression tightened for a second. "Some truths are burdens, Seraphel. You should not carry all of them." They turned down a side hall, and their voices faded. Darius exhaled slowly. He had heard enough to know Valor was pushing for changes the Queen resisted. But what changes? And how was it connected to the strange behavior throughout the palace? Later in the day, Darius was assigned to a patrol route near the LifeWeb chamber. The chamber held an ancient system of glowing cables, nodes, and energy streams that connected the Dominion's essential functions. Only authorized engineers and nobles were allowed inside. As he walked down the long corridor, he noticed two engineers standing near the entrance, their voices low and worried. "The readings keep shifting," one said. "It's getting worse. If the Queen finds out, she must not find out yet," Lord Valor said. "We must wait for his command." Darius froze mid-step, though he hid it by pretending to check a panel on the wall. Lord Valor again. Always Valor. Why would the Queen's own husband order information to be hidden from her? The engineers moved away before Darius could catch more. Once they were gone, he walked slowly toward the LifeWeb chamber. He couldn't go inside, but he could observe. The door was locked, glowing faintly. The energy pattern across its surface pulsed, irregularly flickering, like a heartbeat skipping beats. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He stepped back before anyone noticed and resumed his patrol. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this about politics? Technology? Power? Or something more personal? For the rest of his shift, Darius watched the palace carefully. He noticed 3 nobles wearing identical insignias, whispering in a hidden corner. He saw security officers talking quietly while checking sealed data pads. He even caught a glimpse of Valor entering a private transport room with a group of nobles who carried themselves with an air of secrecy. Every new observation strengthened his feeling that the palace was moving toward an unseen event. By evening, Darius had collected enough clues to know he couldn't ignore the situation. Yet he had no authority to investigate formally. If he reported anything without proof, he risked being removed or transferred off the planet. No one would believe a human over noble-class citizens. He needed more. That night, instead of returning to the barracks, Darius took a different corridor. The palace quieted as the lights dimmed into their night cycle glow. Most halls emptied, leaving only a few guards and late-working servants. He walked casually, as though he were simply stretching his legs. But in truth, he was heading toward the restricted wing he had discovered earlier. As he approached, he slowed his steps. The corridor looked empty. The same faint violet flicker pulsed at the far end. He scanned the area to make sure no one was watching, then walked closer, his heartbeat steady. The door was sealed, with symbols indicating high-level clearance. Darius did not attempt to open it, he knew better. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, pretending to adjust his boot. A soft hum vibrated through the floor beneath him. Energy. Machinery. Something active inside. He heard faint voices behind the door. The alignment is nearly ready. Once the Queen signs the decree, Valor will command the shift. Humans will lose their position. Darius's blood ran cold. Humans were being targeted, removed. Blamed for something? He needed to know more. But the voices faded, and footsteps approached from inside. Darius moved away quickly but calmly, walking down the hall just as 2 nobles exited. They barely glanced at him, assuming he was on standard patrol. He kept his face neutral, but inside, questions shouted for answers. Back at the barracks, Darius lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling just like the night before. Only now he understood more. Valor wasn't simply influencing politics, he was planning something. A shift in power, a change that required secrecy, control, and silence. The Queen was being kept in the dark. Humans were being pushed out. And the lifeweb, the heart of the Dominion, was unstable only when touched by sabotage. Darius felt a deep instinct rising. Something about Valor's plan was dangerous, not only for the Queen, but for the entire Dominion. Perhaps even for humanity's place in the galaxy. The next morning, Darius found himself reassigned again, this time to a hallway near Valor's personal study. The timing felt too precise to be coincidence. Had Valor noticed him yesterday, or did the reassignment have nothing to do with him? He remained alert, more cautious than usual. Around midday, Valor entered the hallway, speaking to a small group of nobles. "We proceed tonight," he said quietly. "Everything is ready. Tonight." The word echoed in Darius's mind like a warning bell. The nobles walked away. Valor stepped into his study, the door closing with a soft chime. Darius tried to look calm, but inside he understood what this meant. The secret plan he had been piecing together was nearing completion. Whatever was going to happen would happen very soon. Maybe even within hours. He felt a knot tighten in his chest. He was only one person, a human guard overlooked by almost everyone in the palace. He had no allies, no authority, and no access to high-level areas. But he had information. Enough to know that the Queen was at risk. Enough to know that Valor planned something that could change the Dominion forever. Enough to know he had no time left to wait. As the day moved toward evening, Darius made a decision. He would act. Carefully. Quietly. Without breaking rules but using every gap he could find. He didn't know exactly what Valor planned, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. If he did nothing, everything could fall apart. And so, as the palace lights dimmed once more and night cycle began, Darius Hale, the guard no one noticed, prepared himself to step into the shadows of a conspiracy that had been unfolding right in front of him. He just hoped he wasn't already too late. Night fell quietly over the Arkel Palace, yet Darius Hale felt anything but calm. The hallways glowed with soft blue lights, and most nobles had retired to their quarters. Servants moved silently as they completed last tasks of the day. Guards changed shifts with practiced motions. Everything looked peaceful. But Darius knew the peace was only on the surface. Inside the palace's hidden corners, a plan was unfolding. Valor's plan. And tonight, it would reach its peak. Darius walked slowly through the corridor assigned to him, trying to look like a guard simply doing his duty. His heart beat steadily but strongly, pushing him forward. He had spent days collecting small pieces of information, but this was the first time he truly felt the danger growing around him. He needed to gather as much evidence as possible. He needed to know what exactly would happen tonight. And most important of all, he needed a way to protect the queen. She might not notice him. She might not even know his name, but Darius knew that if he stayed quiet, she would face danger alone. As he reached a quiet intersection of two long halls, he paused. He looked left, then right. Both directions were empty. The soft hum of energy conduits filled the air. He leaned slightly against a pillar and listened. Nothing. He waited a little longer. Still. Nothing. Then, a faint sound, a whisper, or perhaps a soft click, came from a small maintenance doorway nearby. Darius straightened and walked casually toward it. The door was half open. A weak violet light glowed from inside, the same color he had seen near the restricted wing. He stepped close and heard voices. Valor has given final approval. The life web will adjust itself after the reset. The queen has no idea. Humans will be blamed for the shift in energy. Darius inhaled slowly and kept his expression blank. The voices came from two technicians, their thin silhouettes visible through the narrow gap. They spoke calmly, as though discussing simple maintenance tasks. But their words carried the weight of a quiet disaster. A reset. A shift in energy. Humans blamed. He didn't enter the room. Instead, he stepped back as quietly as he had come. If the technicians saw him listening, they might report him, and if Valor's eyes were already searching for loose ends, Darius couldn't risk exposing himself too soon. He needed more information, more certainty, and he needed to understand why humans were involved at all. He walked back to his patrol route, taking a slower path so he could listen to more conversations. Most halls were empty. But near the central staircase, he found two nobles standing close together. Whispering urgently, "The queen still refuses to sign the decree," one said. "She must sign it tonight," the other replied. "Valor cannot move forward if she doesn't agree." The other says, "She will not agree. Then Valor will use the backup plan." Darius paused at the corner, pretending to check his datapad. Backup plan? What did that mean? He was certain now that Valor wasn't simply giving bad advice, he was preparing a complete political move. One that could change the entire Dominion. One noble continued. "The Queen believes humans will guide a new era. Valor believes they will bring instability. But why blame humans? They only want cooperation. You know why. If the Dominion shifts away from humans now, the old alliances return. The nobles gain control again." Darius felt the pieces slide into place. Valor didn't want humans removed because they were dangerous. He wanted humans removed because they were changing things. Because they threatened the old systems. Because the Queen's reforms gave humans influence. And Valor didn't want influence shared, he wanted it for himself. The nobles walked away, leaving Darius alone with his thoughts. He stood in the silent hallway, his breathing steady, his mind racing. Tonight, backup plan, blaming humans, resetting the life web. The entire palace was about to be caught in a storm, and no one except Valor's allies seemed aware of the danger. Darius turned toward the northern wing. He knew where he needed to go next. If there was one place that held the key to Valor's plan, it was the life web chamber. The technicians had mentioned adjustments happening there. The nobles hinted at energy shifts. Everything pointed to the chamber, but the life web chamber was strictly guarded. He approached carefully. The long corridor leading to the entrance was quiet. Two elite guards stood on each side of the glowing door. Their armor shimmered dimly in the night cycle light. Darius couldn't approach openly. He stopped at the far end of the hall and pretended to check his report panel on the wall. His eyes, however, watched the guards closely. Minutes passed. Then an engineer arrived, carrying a silver datapad. The guard scanned her identiband and stepped aside. The door opened, releasing a soft wave of violet light before closing behind her. The moment the door sealed, another hum vibrated through the corridor. The sound was deep and unsettling. Darius stayed where he was, watching the pulsing glow behind the door. He imagined complex energy structures shifting inside, responding to secret commands from people working against the Queen. A sense of urgency pushed through him. He turned away and began walking back toward the main hall. But his thoughts were no calmer. He needed a way to alert someone loyal to the Queen. Someone who would believe him. But who? Most nobles were aligned with Valor or feared going against him. Most guards followed orders without question. And humans had very little voice in the palace. He finally reached the east wing. As he rounded the corner, he nearly collided with a figure carrying a stack of datapads. It was Lyra, one of the Queen's personal attendants. She gasped softly, dropping one datapad. "Oh, sorry," Darius said quickly, kneeling to pick it up. "No harm done," Lyra replied, smiling faintly. Darius hesitated. Lyra was trusted by the Queen. She was one of the few people who sometimes smiled at him. Could he risk telling her anything? He handed her the datapad. "There is tension in the palace." She nodded. "There has been for weeks." Darius's voice lowered. "Lyra, if something was happening, something hidden, would the Queen know?" Lyra frowned slightly. "If it concerns the Dominion, she should." "Why do you ask?" Darius lowered his gaze. He couldn't reveal too much. "Not yet. I believe the Queen is being kept away from certain information." Lyra's eyes widened slightly in confusion. "That shouldn't be possible." Darius shook his head. "I know. But I've seen things. Heard conversations. Something is happening tonight." Lyra stared at him for a moment, searching his face for uncertainty or exaggeration. She found none. Her expression tightened with worry. "Darius," she whispered. "If you know something important, you must tell the Queen yourself." "She doesn't even notice me," he replied quietly. "Then make her notice," Lyra said gently. "She listens to truth, even when it comes from unexpected places." But before Darius could respond, a signal echoed through the hallway, 3 soft chimes, then silence. Lyra's face paled slightly. "That's a recall signal," she said. "All attendants must go to their stations." She hurried away, leaving Darius alone. 3 chimes. A recall signal. Something was beginning. Darius walked quickly toward the central hall. His footsteps echoed as the palace shifted into evening cycle operations. Guards moved to new positions. Attendants rushed into different wings. A sense of organized movement spread everywhere, but none of them knew the real reason. Darius turned a corner and froze. Valor stood at the far end of the hall, speaking quietly to a group of nobles wearing deep crimson insignias. They dispersed quickly, leaving Valor alone. For a moment, Valor looked straight ahead, unaware of Darius watching him. His posture was confident. His expression calm, but there was something beneath it. A cold certainty. A hidden triumph. Then Valor turned and walked toward the council wing. Darius exhaled slowly. This was the moment. If Valor reached the Queen before Darius warned her, the entire night would spiral out of control. Darius started moving. Not running would attract attention. But walking with purpose, with growing speed, his breath steady, his steps quiet, he headed toward the Queen's private hall. One guard stood near the entrance. Darius approached, trying to look official. "I have a message for Her Majesty," he said. The guard lifted an eyebrow. "From whom?" "From someone who knows the meaning of the recall signal." The guard hesitated. Darius could see the doubt in his eyes. But something about Darius's steady voice made him think twice. Finally, he nodded. I will inform her. He turned and stepped inside. Darius waited, forcing himself to stay calm. His heart beat faster with every second that passed. He expected the worst, being dismissed, ignored, or even removed. But then the door opened again. The guard stepped out. The Queen will see you. Darius inhaled deeply and walked forward. For the first time, he was being noticed. And everything he knew, every detail he had gathered, would matter now. He hoped it would be enough. The Queen's private chamber was quiet when Darius entered. Soft light glowed from the high crystal ceiling, filling the room with gentle warmth. Queen Seraphel stood near a tall window, looking out at the twin moons rising over the horizon. Her silver-white robes shimmered faintly, and the glow around her eyes was softer than usual, as if tiredness pressed against her thoughts. When she turned toward Darius, he felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She rarely looked at human guards directly, yet now her gaze rested on him fully, focused and curious. You asked to speak with me, she said in a calm voice. This is unusual. What is your purpose, Guard Hale? Darius bowed his head respectfully. Your Majesty, forgive my boldness. I know I am only a guard. But something is wrong in the palace. The Queen watched him carefully, her glowing eyes unreadable. Go on. Darius took a slow breath and explained everything he had observed. He told her about the strange meetings, the flickering lights in restricted wings, the technicians speaking about hiding information, and the nobles whispering about a reset. He described how Valor moved through the palace with secret allies, and how humans were being blamed for unknown reasons. Queen Seraphel listened without interrupting. Her face remained gentle, yet Darius felt the weight of her attention like a heavy blanket. When he finished, she remained silent for a moment. Finally, she spoke. You have seen much for someone so overlooked. Darius nodded. Because no one pays attention to me, Your Majesty. That made it easier to notice things. Seraphel stepped closer. And you bring this to me instead of staying silent. Why? Darius swallowed, choosing his words with care. Because silence would allow danger to grow. And because you are my queen. You deserve the truth. Seraphel's expression softened with something like gratitude. But before she could respond, a soft chime echoed through the chamber. She touched a panel on her wrist, and a small holographic display appeared. Her eyes narrowed slightly. A meeting request from Valor. He wishes to speak with me immediately. Darius felt his heart tighten. Your Majesty, I fear he plans something tonight. Seraphel lowered the display. She stared at Darius for a long moment. I knew Valor was troubled by my reforms, but I did not know the extent. If you meet him now, Darius said quietly, he may use the LifeWeb reset to force you into a decision. Or to blame humans. Or to shift power. The Queen breathed slowly. Then we must act with caution. Another chime sounded, this one deeper, echoing through the palace walls. Darius had never heard it before. Seraphel's eyes widened slightly. That signal is not for attendance. It is for internal transition. What does that mean? Darius asked. It means, she said softly, someone is changing the palace's energy configuration, without my permission. Darius knew instantly what it meant. The plan had begun. The Queen stepped away from the window and moved toward the communication console. I will summon my senior advisors. They must see the system logs. Before she could activate the console, a message appeared on the screen, blocked access. Someone has overridden my controls, she whispered. The palace lights flickered once. A soft ripple moved through the floor, like the building itself exhaled. Darius clenched his fists lightly. Your Majesty, I saw Valor near the council wing earlier tonight. I think he's already preparing the reset. Seraphel's eyes hardened with calm resolve. Then we must go to the LifeWeb chamber before the reset completes. She walked toward the entrance. Darius followed. But before they stepped into the hall, she turned to him. Darius Hale, she said softly, you have shown loyalty beyond duty. Stay close to me. For a moment, Darius wondered if he heard correctly. The queen had spoken his name directly. A guard she barely noticed before tonight. He nodded firmly. Yes, Your Majesty. They stepped into the corridor. The palace had changed. Lights dimmed, then brightened. Attendants moved quickly with confused expressions. Guards checked their devices, unsure why the internal signals echoed through their helmets. The entire building hummed with shifting energy. Darius stayed slightly behind and to the left of the queen, watching every corner. They reached a large staircase. At the bottom, the hall near the life-web chamber glowed with faint violet pulses, stronger than anything Darius had seen before. 3 nobles in dark robes hurried past, whispering urgently, "Valor will speak with her soon. She must not reach the chamber too early. Keep the guards busy." Darius and Seraphel hid behind a pillar until the nobles disappeared. The queen exhaled slowly. "It is worse than I feared." They continued toward the chamber. 2 elite guards stood at the entrance, identical to the pair from earlier, but their expressions were rigid and too controlled. When the queen approached, they bowed deeply, but Darius noticed a slight hesitation. "Open the chamber," Seraphel ordered gently. One guard bowed again. "Your Majesty, Lord Valor has instructed us to wait until his arrival." Seraphel lifted her chin slightly. "The life web belongs to the throne, not to my consort. Open it." The guards exchanged worried glances. One shifted nervously, torn between loyalty to the queen and fear of Valor. The palace's silence grew heavier. Then, unexpectedly, the second guard stepped aside. "We follow the queen." The first guard nodded hesitantly and activated the panel. The door slid open, releasing a wave of violet light. Inside, the air shimmered with lines of energy flowing across the walls, floor, and ceiling. The life-web chamber was breathtaking. Dozens of glowing strands pulsed like living veins. Holographic symbols drifted through the air, shifting as energy moved. It looked almost like a living organism, responding to unseen commands. But something was wrong. Half the energy strands flickered erratically. Several nodes glowed too brightly, as if overloaded. And in the center of the room stood a circular console filled with new directives, none of them approved by the queen. Darius and Seraphel entered. The queen approached the central console. Her fingers moved across the floating symbols, scanning the hidden commands. Her expression changed with every new discovery, first confusion, then shock, then a calm sadness. "This reset," she whispered. "It will redirect the Dominion's energy flow. It will place the life web under Valor's control, not mine. And it will cut off human access entirely." Darius felt a heavy pressure settle in his chest. "He wants full authority." Seraphel nodded. "He believes humans are a distraction. He believes my reforms weaken our tradition." She paused. "But I never imagined he would go this far." 2. Before they could act, the chamber door slid open again. Valor entered. His posture was confident, his silver-white robes glowing faintly. His eyes met Seraphel's, but his expression didn't show surprise. He had expected this moment. "Seraphel," he said softly, "I was looking for you." She faced him with calm strength. "Valor, you hid information from me. You altered the life web without permission." Valor stepped closer, his tone gentle. "Because you were too attached to humans, too willing to change our world for them. I did what was necessary." "You acted against your queen," Seraphel replied. "No," Valor said quietly. "I acted for the Dominion." Darius watched him carefully. Valor's voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed a cold certainty. He truly believed he was right. He truly believed the Dominion needed a ruler who would reject humanity. "End the reset," Seraphel ordered. "Now." Valor shook his head slowly. "I cannot. It has gone too far." He gestured toward the console. "When the cycle completes, the Dominion will return to its true path." Darius stepped forward slightly, instinctively placing himself closer to the queen. Valor's eyes flicked toward him. "A human guard," Valor said with quiet disbelief. "You brought him here?" "He brought truth," the queen replied. "Truth you tried to hide." Valor's expression tightened. Truth is only useful when it serves stability. Seraphel did not respond. Instead, she walked to the console, her fingers moving quickly across the energy symbols. Valor watched her with a mix of sadness and frustration. "You cannot stop it," he said. "I made sure of that." "You forget one thing," Seraphel replied softly. "The life web responds to the throne." Her palm touched a glowing symbol. A soft chime echoed. New lines of energy appeared, lines Valor had not expected. He stepped forward, surprised. "You accessed the core how?" Darius felt a surge of relief. The Queen had a way to undo the damage. The chamber pulsed with light. Slowly, the flickering strands began to stabilize. Several overloaded nodes dimmed back to normal levels. The reset process slowed, then froze. Valor stared at the console, shock replacing confidence. "Seraphel, stop. You cannot." She spoke calmly, firmly. "This dominion is not built on fear. It is built on balance." Valor opened his mouth as if to argue again, but stopped when the chamber light shifted from violet to soft gold. The life web had accepted the Queen's intervention. The reset was cancelled. Silence filled the room for several long moments. Finally, Valor lowered his head. "You never should have chosen humans over your own people." Seraphel's voice softened. "I chose harmony. And you chose control." Darius stood silently behind her. He did not speak, but his presence was steady, grounding. Guards arrived moments later, responding to new signals from the restored life web. Valor did not resist. He stepped back, expression empty, as the guards escorted him out of the chamber. When they were gone, the Queen turned to Darius. "You saved the Dominion tonight," she said gently. Darius shook his head. "I only paid attention." She smiled softly. "Sometimes, that is what changes everything." The next day, the palace felt different. The tension had lifted. The lights glowed normally. The nobles walked with calm expressions, though whispers filled the hallways about what had happened. For the first time, Queen Seraphel summoned Darius to the throne hall. She stood at the center, surrounded by trusted advisors. When Darius approached, she spoke clearly so all could hear. "Darius Hale, you saw what others ignored. You acted when others were silent. For that, I name you Interworld Liaison of the Crown, responsible for building trust between humans and the Dominion." Darius felt stunned. He bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I won't disappoint you." "I know," she said with a gentle smile. And so, the guard who had once been invisible became a bridge between two worlds, a reminder that sometimes the smallest voice can protect the greatest peace.